Welcome to the Coach Doctor podcast, a podcast where we discuss aspects of sports coaching from grassroots to grandstands. I'm your host, James Barkell, and on this podcast, we hear from academics who research coaching. We talk to coaches on the front line from development levels through to professional coaches, and we discuss other elements of successful sporting programs with experts and practitioners from a range of sports science fields, motivational psychology, strength and conditioning, and many other elements required for successful performance. If you'd like to know more about what we do at the Coach Doctor, you can visit our website, thecoachdoctor.com.au, and learn more about our services, or follow me on Instagram at thecoachdr or Twitter at James_Barkell for more regular information. Before I start the episode, I just wanted to let all the coaches and athletes out there know about a special deal that we've got going with Elite Performance Journals. EPJ make both coaches' notepads ideal for developing session plans and for reviewing or reflecting on sessions. And for athletes looking for that extra edge, they also have an Elite Athlete Journal designed around specific needs of up-and-coming professional athletes. For any listeners of the Coach Doctor podcast, you can receive 20% off on any of their products by simply going to eliteperformancejournal.com, check out all of their products, and when you check out, use the code COACHDOCTOR, all one word and lowercase, for a special 20% discount. In this episode, I talked to Courtney Brackenrig. Courtney is a recent graduate working in the sports science field and a former elite athlete with the Australian Institute of Sport. We discuss her educational pathway, her experiences as an elite athlete, and the importance of volunteering to create opportunities within the sports industry. Courtney also discusses how she continues to learn from a range of mentors and the importance of having balance in the sports industry. Courtney, welcome to the podcast. Can you start by giving our listeners a brief introduction to who you are and what you're currently doing in the sporting landscape?
No worries. Thanks for having me, James. So, my name's Courtney. I'm currently 24 years old, just recently. I'm born and bred in Mudgee, New South Wales, which is a very small country town just outside of Dubbo, New South Wales, so about 3 hours northwest of Sydney. I've been quite heavily involved in sport all my life, really big into athletics and netball. Went to boarding school, a sporting boarding school actually, in Sydney at Pymble Ladies College, competed there, heavily involved in athletics there. But from there, went to Canberra, down at the AIS and down at UC doing an undergrad degree there, did sport and exercise science and nutrition. And from there, I decided after that, I'd move up to the Gold Coast because my family moved here a few years ago, and I'd pursue a master's in dietetics. But at the moment in the sporting world, I'm not doing much. Masters is my life at the moment. It's 9 till 4, Monday through to Friday, but I am doing some volunteering work here and there, and I do have some private S&C clients for netball and general population fitness that I'm involved in at the moment. But yeah, just doing some volunteering work with the Gold Coast Suns, and hopefully at the moment looking at going down in Melbourne in a couple of weeks' time to spend some time with St Kilda AFL.
Okay, just quickly, how did you get into javelin of all sports?
That's an interesting one. So it's came about playing cricket at school, and I was out in the midfield and I pegged a ball absolutely from the backfield all the way down to the pitch. And then the coach of the cricket team said I should give athletics a shot. I was always doing athletics, but not the field events. I was a very fast sprinter. And then I decided to give the throws a go. And then, I picked it up javelin year 9, went all the way through to the state competition without any training, and I won a medal at state. And then I got looked at someone at state as like a bit of a scout there. So he decided that he'd pick me up on his squad. And that's where I moved to Sydney so I could train jav. But it's just one of those things you just pick up at school and you just see how far you can throw it, really.
Yeah, wow. Because I guess it's not a traditional or a typical sport for young people to sort of pick up and get involved with.
Yeah, no, definitely not young girls either.
It's quite a specialist sport, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. They say it's, and I would have to agree, it's the most technical athletic event other than high jump. It's got a lot of components like sprint, run, jump. It's all events combined into one, really. So it's a very interesting sport.
Yeah, wow. So you've held a few different roles in sport. Can you give us a brief history of the qualifications you've had to obtain?
Yeah, so I guess it's probably best to go all the way back to the start. So basically straight out of high school, I went to the University of Canberra where I studied a double degree. So that was in sport and exercise science and human nutrition. And then as I was studying that, coming across doing internships, working for the Brumbies in particular, my supervisor, John Mitchell, he was the head of high performance at the time. he said it'd be a really good idea to get my ASCA accreditation, which is the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association. And because I've already done a few years at uni at the time, I got recognition points of prior learning. So I didn't have to complete the first part of the course. So I went straight to level 2. But basically what that does at that level, it gives you the ability to coach athletes basically all the way up to an international level. So I could work in any sort of sporting club, team environment, privately with PTs and things like that. So I did that as well while I was studying my undergraduate. At the same time, another person told me that it would be better for me to be more employable in a private space if I also did my certificate 3 and 4 in fitness. So on top of my undergrad, I did ASCA, Cert 3, 4 in fitness. And then after that, I decided to pursue the nutrition side of things. So I did an Ayurvedic nutrition course, and now I'm doing my master's in dietetics. But yeah, in terms of the sport and the exercise science, it was, the undergraduate, the ASCA, and the TAFE Cert 3 fitness. So lots of different qualifications going at the same time.
Yeah, it's a lot of things going on at once. And so just to explain to me, because I'm not sure about this, certificate 3 and 4 in fitness, you need those to work as a personal trainer. Is that right? But if you don't have those, you can't work as a personal trainer?
Yeah, that's right. Even if I've got exercise science and ASCA, you're not covered under like the Australian fitness scheme sort of thing. So in order to work privately, you need to have the 3 and the 4. The 3 is just for one-on-one, but the 4 is for group fitness, which I haven't done because I don't really need that one. 3 is enough to get you into the gym, but 4 is if you want to be doing, I suppose, like F45 or something a little bit bigger, but that doesn't quite interest me. So I haven't pursued that pathway. So I've only done the 3, but if I wanted to do the 4, I could just get RPL for the whole thing. I wouldn't have to do it.
Is sports nutrition a big area of your interest? As I can see, it's played a large role in your degrees and what you're doing currently?
Yeah, I think out of all of my studies, sports nutrition has always been what I've wanted to do. I've always wanted to be a dietitian, but it's the pathway that I wanted to get there, which is a little bit different to most people. So most people just go and do the straight up dietetics degree, but after you do a dietetics degree or a master's, you actually have to go and do the Sports Dietitian Australia 12-week intensive, or online. Not sure how it's operating with COVID at the moment, but in order to do that, you have to be an accredited practicing dietitian. So to be a sports dietitian, I had to get the dietetics qualification, but I also decided that, nutrition and sport, they come hand in hand. You can't really do one without the other. So I wanted to be equipped to be able to help people do, in the gym and get bigger, faster, stronger, whatever they need to do, but also pair that with the nutrition. So, recovering or fueling for pre and post performance as well. So yeah, sports nutrition has had the largest, I suppose, influence on what I've wanted to do. And I'm currently still pursuing that. And I think I've been studying for 7 years. So it's a long pathway, but I'm almost at the end.
Look, I was at a Women in Sports conference a few weeks ago with ESSA, and one of the panelists spoke about the alarming rate of disordered eating within female athlete communities. It was something like 70 or 80% of female athletes that have some form of disordered eating. How do you think we can build more awareness around this and improve this in female athletes? And look, it's probably also an issue with a large proportion of male athletes as well, especially with the growth of Instagram and social media things.
Yeah, that's a really big topic. Been there myself. I think most young female athletes would say the same. The problem with eating disorders is you either are identified to be having with an eating disorder by someone who can, I suppose, identify that, whether that be a psychologist or a practicing dietitian, but majority of cases go undetected because they're not willing to speak up. So yeah, it's definitely a really big thing. Definitely happens more so in females than what we see in males, more so because the literature just tells us that females are more concerned with their body image. But I think in particular, because it's coming from the younger ages, obviously, like you said, social media has a large impact, and also the peer friendship groups, families as well. It comes down to a lot of psychosocial environments. But in terms of, raising awareness, I think it highly comes down to education of not just the players themselves, but it really has to do with the coaching and the coaching environment. I've been in a lot of really terrible personal environments where I could say that, eating disorders would be super common because everyone's just got an idea that, being slimmer helps you with sport, which we now know is not the case. You need to be very individualized with how you look and how you train depending on what sport you're in. But I think, if we can get people out there, they're are a lot of, free education sessions offered by Dietetics Australia or Sports Dietetics Australia. But it's trying to advertise that on social media because, we know that these are the platforms that everybody's using, but no one's really doing anything with it at the moment. So I think there's a massive space to use, things like Instagram and TikTok to be really pushing for that education, whether that be targeted for everybody or female athletes specifically. I don't think it would matter. I think it just needs to be made aware of the issue. And, it comes down to a couple other things like we were talking about before jumping on the podcast, fear of foods. We know that people just want to get rid of carbohydrates because they think it's going to ultimately help them lose weight when we know it's not the case anymore. It's more about, we're living in an obesogenic environment at the moment and we're trying to be weight inclusive. So there's a lot of things that we need to cover, but it's, just starting small and then building gradually. So starting small with education, and then we'll just hopefully in a couple of years' time, we can make everybody aware of how, we can manage eating disorders and hopefully prevent them from happening altogether.
Yeah, okay. You mentioned it starts with coaches. Not having been involved as an athlete in female sport, but I've coached female sport a little bit. Are there sports or coaches that encourage certain body types or encourage a certain diet that I guess is aimed at females losing weight? Is this common in female sport?
It is common, but no one likes to talk about it because, no one wants to do the blame game. But obviously there are certain sports where body types are more desired. For example, gymnastics, that's a really classic one that everyone could target. We're looking for that really not slim, but really quite muscular, low body fat percentage in order to do the movements that you need to do. But yeah, there are a couple of sports out there that you could easily pinpoint and say that are struggling more than others. It might come down to funding and a couple of other things. But for example, I suppose we could use athletics. That's a really good example. Not a whole lot of funding going into that system at the moment. And you see like a lot of young up and coming sort of that semi-elite development athletes coming through and their coaches are, unaware of it's a really fine line when coaches do sort of their qualifications, say in either SO or some sort of fitness degree, because there is some sort of nutrition component. And this is the really grey area that we have been with dietitians and working with personal trainers. The difference between us and a dietitian versus sort of a sports trainer is as dietitians, we can medically prescribe diets and, macronutrient distributions according to, things like indirect calorimetry, a couple of other measurements, whereas a PT can really only give that general nutrition advice. So, eat all the food groups and things like that, but everybody takes it too far. So you see at the moment, we've got coaches, personal trainers, whoever it is, spreading misinformation and, about nutrition and diet, and especially social media has a large influence on that. I suppose it's all over Instagram. You've obviously seen all the influencers pushing, I eat this, do this in a day. And young people jump on top of that because they think, they're qualified when really they're not. So other than a couple of other sports, it's sort of that coaching. Anyone who has sort of an influential effect really on an athlete plays a large role. But I definitely see coaching as one of the large influences, mainly because obviously the athletes are coming to them. They spend most of their time with the coaches, so they kind of are the influential role model at the time. But definitely there's a lot of sports out there, but using athletics as my example, but I think any or all sports would have a similar experience.
You're not old by any means. Do you still compete in javelin?
No, I don't, not anymore. Athletics is just one of those things where it's either for you or if it's not for you. I decided for me, especially so just to give you a little bit of context, I went to the AIS on an NSO scholarship level 1, which is sort of just like the baseline entry scholarship at the AIS where I was training for javelin. Training hours were quite hard at that levels. When I was studying full-time, I wasn't studying part-time, which was quite silly on my behalf. But anyway, I decided to go full-time and do the full 4 units. And then we were doing 24 hours training a week on top of that. So, you're looking at, I suppose, anywhere like up to a 40-hour work week, including the study and everything you have to do and try and balance a work life, which I don't think many people have at the moment. I don't have that doing a master's either. But no, I think for me, I really wanted to help people, and my career in sports nutrition and sports performance was more important to me than excelling in my own sport. Don't get me wrong, I did get really far. I did represent Australia in 2017, 2018 at the Oceania Games for athletics, which is sort of like, I suppose, a qualification round for the Commonwealth Games and the Olympics. But I wasn't really training at my best. I wasn't performing very well. Although I was throwing very far, I think my mental health and a couple of other things just weren't working for me. So I actually decided to quit and I resigned. But at the time, I was training with Kelsey Lee Barber. So she's currently Australia's #1 javelin thrower. She's also the one of the top, I think she's top 3 in the, or she is #1 in the world now, I think. I'd have to double check my rankings. But yeah, I used to train with her in their squad in the AIS in Canberra, but she's actually moved up here now, out of all things. But
Okay.
no, I don't compete anymore. It's too much of a toll on my back as well. I've had severe back problems. I actually had back surgery last year to help relieve some of the pain. So yeah, I don't think I play anymore.
Okay. All right. No, thanks for that. Look, I guess the other question I had around coaching, do you think that coaches need, or from an Australian coaching perspective, we need to provide some more education to coaches, especially around body image and dietary concerns, specifically, or probably more so for female athletes, or do you think, look, it's just, take it as it is?
I think, yeah, you'd have to take it how it is. I think depending, it'd all come down to coach receptiveness, I suppose. If people are open to learning new things, that's always a positive. But as we know, most people aren't, and they just want to stick within their comfort zone and just continue how they're going. But I think if we did go down that pathway, it'd be the most optimal thing we could ever do in sport, and also just general population as well, not just talking about sport. I think any young female out there would be really struggling with body image if you're a little bit insecure, which most young females are. But I definitely think, yeah, there's a lot of practices now which we learn about in dietetics, which is about weight inclusiveness and how to manage body image and a couple of other things. So I think if we can get that down to a general population level, and especially within sport, yeah, it would solve a lot of problems for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Just another thing, going back to your own experience as a javelin thrower, you mentioned the mental strain that competing at that level puts on you. How much effort as an athlete does it take to compete at that level mentally, in both being able to cope with everyday life, what you're trying to achieve in sport, and then when you're balancing, university commitments and trying to earn a salary as well, doing other things? How much of a toll is that?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, that's all you think about. It is a huge toll. And I think any athlete, male or female, competing at any level, especially at that level, which I was competing at, would say the same. Mental health, yeah, really poor, especially because I wasn't living at home. Like, all of my support was back up in Queensland at the time. And it was hard because when I was training at the AIS, we train as a squad. We train together, but we compete together. So there's always that sort of aspect of, I really like this person, but at the end of the day, I have to be better than them. So you're always competing with yourself. You're competing with the people that you surround yourself with. I'd also work with the same people. So we'd see each other all day, every day. Fortunately, I just didn't live with them at the time. So I'd come home and that would probably be my little bit of space. But that little bit of time that I had to myself, I'd be doing the studying, the exam preparations. I'd have to do my meal prep, living at university at the time. I wasn't at the AIS, so you can't live at the AIS actually unless you're on the basketball team or a part of the volleyball program, because that's just how the accommodation system works down there, because it's a federal program rather than like QAS or NSWIS, which is sort of that state-based. So living out of home, I should say, sorry, that was really, really tough. I think going back to that female body image as well, at the time I had no nutrition knowledge. Like, I was straight out of school. I had to learn how to cook for myself, which, for a young female athlete, you're kind of thinking, oh, I shouldn't be, how much do I need to be eating? Like, it's just a really big unknown gray space. And yeah, it takes a huge toll just trying to balance everything. You end up having no balance. Like, you realize that you end up being burnt out. Going back to mental health, I found, my parents would always say, you sound really sad. You sound angry all the time. And now when I can look back and reflect on it, you can definitely see the patterns. Like, I was definitely, going through, I wouldn't say it was depression or anything. All this is self-diagnosed, by the way. I never went and saw anyone. But yeah, you could definitely see where it was taking a toll. I was quite ill, like sickness wise, performance obviously wasn't great. Although my grades were always good. That's one thing I could keep high. I could always have really good grades. But I think at the end of the day, yeah, it's really, really important to have that really good work-life balance. You need to have a good support system, which is something I really didn't have other than remotely with my mum and dad and a couple of close friends. And you really need to have a good training environment as well, which I did for a bit. But after a while, when I started to really tap into that aggression and terrible performance, I just went into a downward spiral from there. But it's good that I can now reflect back on that and I can learn from my mistakes. And, now working in that sports coaching side of things, I can hopefully steer athletes away from that pathway. So something that, I think would be really beneficial is sort of like an athlete monitoring system. Even within individual sports, we don't really see that. You don't really see that in team sports. But I think coming down to at that sort of level, it'd be very beneficial to have something like that, because no one knew what I was going through. I wasn't going to share it with anybody. Like, I thought it was my burden, but now I know. So that's what I tell all my athletes. And when I'm working with teams, we want to have that open communication. We want to make sure everyone's feeling okay. If you're not okay, I want to know about it. Take the time off. It's super important. But mental toll, definitely a really big one.
Yeah, I was going to ask that, is there anyone down there who's down at the AIS when people like yourself are going down there as individual athletes that are, I guess, acting as like mentors and giving advice around how you should go about cooking or preparing meals and those sorts of things? Or is it you just sort of left to your own devices and feedback from a coach and that's about it?
It kind of comes down to what sort of scholarship you're on. What sport has a really big impact? So I used to work at AIS as tour guide, so I know a lot about the system. So, like, for example, if you take basketball, they're the AIS's top performing young development program. So a lot of the people that come through our basketball program actually end up going playing, for Australia, like the Opals and things like that. So they were really, really well equipped. They've got all the funding, they've got all the people there. But for someone on athletics, at that time, we got all of our funding cut, and that was the time in the lead up, I think, as a result of the Commonwealth Games, where there was that big reshuffle of funding, and athletics was one of those ones that got the cut. But, it was kind of like one of those things where you go down there, you train with your coach. My squad acted as sort of my mentorship role. So Kelsey was probably one of the really big mentors for me at that time. So, she'd share with me what she was eating because she was at that really top level competing for Australia. She had access to, the dietitians working there, which at the time was Michelle Moynihan. And, Kelsey would show me what she was eating. And obviously, no one should eat exactly the same as other people because we're all individual, but it was a really good guidance pathway for me. And then my coach, Mike, which was Kelsey's coach / husband, he gave me a little bit of advice as well because he's got a biomechanics background. But it honestly just comes down to what sport you're in. The scholarship level played a big part of it because I was on quite a lower tier. It was kind of just like, oh, you're off on your own devices, see you later. And if I wanted any additional help, I actually had to pay for that. Nothing really was included other than the training facilities, the coach, and a couple of other small detailed things. But it just comes down to what sport you're in and your level of scholarship, I suppose.
Yeah, okay. It's interesting. It's good advice and good knowledge because, if somebody's listening that, is little bit younger and they're sort of looking at going down that pathway, it's good for them to sort of, I guess, understand and know what sort of lays ahead and how they can best prepare themselves. So, thanks for being so open and talking about it.
No, that's okay. I think, everybody, it's important that athletes share their journey because a lot of people just think, it's so black and white, like, oh, athletes have it such a good life. It's so easy for them, they just train, they have no life. Like they don't do anything other than sport, which is certainly not the case. And I think the more people that are aware of, what people do, and I wasn't like anywhere top tier level performer. I was only sort of that semi-tier professional, but you can only imagine just how hard it would be for the really top people to be training, trying to fit in work, because like most sports, athletics, we don't get any sort of payment. We're not televised or anything like that, so we don't get any funding either. So we have to have a job. Most female athletes have jobs anyway because we're underpaid. We're trying to train, we're trying to study. Some people have kids. I think, it's really important to share these experiences so people become aware, and then we can try and help people and so other people don't fall into the same sort of traps that we do. So, trying to shape the way of the sporting world by helping other people, which is sadly not what a lot of people like to do. They don't like to share their journeys and try and help other people, which I think is why I'm so inspired to go working in the sort of the sports coaching pathway and dietetics. I think, the more people know, the better.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, that's a really good attitude to have, to want to share and to want to see that, future athletes, experience things potentially in a better way than you might have done or other people who have gone before you might have done. So awesome. Great job.
Thank you.
One of your qualifications, now I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, that you mentioned is a bit left field. Ayurveda. What is Ayurveda? And is it something that you specifically use in sport, or is it something that
Yeah, so Ayurveda.
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 Okay.
It's an interesting one. So this is, I suppose, not to take it out of its own context or anything, it's sort of the Indian version of Chinese medicine. So it dates, they say, all the way back 5,000 years ago. Basically, they believe it's when the universe was first created. That's when Ayurveda was born. So it's Sanskrit, so Aru, meaning life, and Veda meaning knowledge, so knowledge of life. And basically what it is, like I mentioned, it's an Indian sort of practice, and it dates all the way back 5,000 years ago. It takes into consideration the laws of nature. So it's all about balance, universe, manifestation, and energy. It's certainly not used in sport, although some of the underlying principles are definitely used in sport, but no one actually recognizes it as an Ayurvedic practice. It's just sort of like little pieces tiered out. So it's not really well known because in westernized countries like Australia, for example, a lot of the Sanskrit texts and a couple of other really important things, so like the Buddhas and the people who were studying it all the way back thousands of years ago, India was invaded, it was colonized like most countries. So a lot of the information and the text was missing and it was burnt and destroyed. So that knowledge has been lost over time, but it's certainly coming back into play now. We're seeing a lot of sort of that, I suppose you could say, left of field, as you said it, that sort of medicine sort of practice, sort of that natural herbal elements coming back through. So it encompasses a lot of things. So it encompasses like meditation, personality development, and energy reading. So for example, they call it the doshas. So we all have some sort of personality type. There's 3 doshas. So you can pick up on people's traits through that. It's sort of like having a star sign in a way, and you can really get a really good detailed understanding of people. It takes into account aromatherapy, herbs, nutrition, a lot of natural things, no medications, nothing. It's just, all about the mind-body connection and relating it back to the environment. But definitely not used in sport. Definitely a big space for it, though, I think. Really good example of it, actually, when I was volunteering for the Gold Coast Suns, they actually use essential oils in the change room and they put it on the diffuser before the boys go out and play games. So that was the first time I've seen it in sport, but it was very interesting to see someone actually do it. Super, super cool, but definitely a big space for it. Being able to read people. Meditation's a really big one as well, part of Ayurveda. And we know at the moment there's a lot of literature showing, athletes practicing mindfulness, meditation. It's improving performance, so sort of that psychological connection there. But no one really sees it as an Ayurvedic principle. It's just meditation. But definitely a big opening for it. But it's one of those things that no one really knows about. You'd have to get really good proper training in it like I've had. But big opportunity. It's just if people are open to learn something like that, it's very left of field, Ayurveda.
Okay. You talked about meditation is potentially like something that a lot of sports teams are using now, like in terms of mindfulness and I guess mental preparation. What makes meditation from Ayurveda? Is it different from normal meditation or other types of meditation? Because I have no idea around these sorts of things.
I'm not a psychologist, so I can't really speak to the different types of, mindfulness and the meditation practice that goes on behind those sorts of doors. But I know that they are very similar, but Ayurveda has more of that. It's not so much about imagery and, how you're visioning yourself performing. It's more about, centering yourself with the energy surrounded by the earth, really gravitating sort of yourself, and manifestation is a big one. So rather than, I suppose, imagining yourself winning, it's manifesting. So the difference between imagining is, you think you're going to do it, but manifesting is this is actually going to happen. You're going to make it happen. There's a lot of literature and a lot of people. So Dr. Joe Dispenza. So anyone listening, get on YouTube and have a look at him. Super interesting guy. He talks about manifestation and the power of will. And there's actually been really off topic, but there was a lady that manifested winning the lotto and she's won it 3 times. So it's about, making something happen and making it happen repetitively and believing that it's going to do it and putting it out there to the universe. So saying, this is going to happen to me on this specific day. This is how I'm going to do it. The energies that are related to it, sort of relating to like star signs and the moon and things like that. But very left of field meditation and manifestation, but similar, but not same, but different.
Yeah. Okay. Like the elephant on the line. One of the other things you mentioned was like aromatherapy and stuff used, like the Gold Coast Suns were using it before. Was it before training? What does aromatherapy do? What's it used for?
So they were diffusing, so aromatherapy, yeah. So putting oils in like a blend of water and then putting it into the air, so aromatherapy like that. But it's about the types of oils and the blends that you use. So, for example, I've got like a huge collection in my bedroom. It's like the ones that give focus and really attune your brain are things like peppermint, eucalyptus. There's one called Balance. So a lot of natural oils that you find in like trees and plants. There's a lot of left of field research coming out at the moment saying, things like peppermint and natural plants can really attune your brain and help you focus on one specific thing. It's really been used in a lot of studies for ADHD and a couple of other intellectual disabilities and things like that. But the oils that they were blending at the Gold Coast Suns were peppermint was one of them, and I am pretty sure eucalyptus was the other one as well. So yeah, they have that going around. The boys would come and they would smell it, as they're going out before a game, and they'd have it also boiling in a big hot jug with a towel. So they would put the towel on their face as well. So sort of getting the oils absorbed through the skin. But yeah, it's just depending on the types of oils that you're blending, they all have different effects. So they're also being used, for example, frankincense. It's a really big one in the cancer space. So ingesting frankincense internally in like a vegetable capsule has been shown to decrease the mets of cancer and the metastases. So yeah, super interesting space, but yeah, that requires a naturopathy degree, which is not my forte, but there's a little bit of it in Ayurveda and the types of oils that should and shouldn't be used.
Okay, great. That's very interesting. It's probably very different from a lot of the other things we've spoken about previously on the podcast, but it's good to hear and learn about some of these other aspects that might be used in different sporting settings. Now, you mentioned that you've had a few years volunteering, firstly with the Gold Coast Suns, also with the Brumbies Rugby. How important is volunteering for learning and progression in the sports science and coaching fields?
Oh, volunteering, I cannot express to anyone listening who is studying or trying to get themselves a name in sport. The only way to do it is volunteering. Get your name out there. Prove that you're willing to do work, not so much about like for free. It's showing your worth and your eagerness and how keen you are to get on board and helping people. We know that most sporting clubs at the moment, COVID, like everything's had a big toll on funding, and a lot of sports are going towards having one person doing multiple roles. So volunteering and helping sort of decrease that workload for these people, it really puts a good name on your back, and it can really set you up for some really good foots in the door. So all of my volunteering has led to jobs. I actually haven't, I had to think about that. I haven't applied for a single job. I've volunteered for all of them, and I've been given positions as of volunteering. So volunteer. That's my expert advice.
Some people might volunteer for something and be asked to do a multitude of jobs. If you have, let's say, skills in one thing and you haven't learned how to do another thing, let's say you were asked to do some GPS analysis or something along those lines, and you'd never done that, you'd never experienced that before. As a volunteer, is it a good thing to say, you know what, I haven't done it before, but I want to try and learn about it and develop my skills in that? Or, is it okay good to sort of say, look, I haven't done that before, you're better off giving that to someone else? What are your thoughts around that?
Funny that you say that, because that's how my role about the Brumbies came about. I had no idea about GPS, and my main role with Brumbies was GPS data analytics. I was volunteering there actually for strength and conditioning, and the lady that was doing the GPS at the time, she actually quit to pursue a job overseas. So they asked me if I had any experience, and I flat out said no, and I want to learn, and I did. I learned GPS system in like 8 days, and then I was hired to do GPS and data analytics. So I definitely think it's worth, if you don't know how to do it, putting your hand up to know it and get it done and put it on your resume is a really great thing to do. I don't think you can be underqualified in any area. Sports science, there's so many areas to encompass. I think the more that you know, the more employable that you are. If you've only got skills in one area, you're not going to be very versatile. Whereas if you've got a little bit of experience in a little bit different areas, you might have a better chance than someone else. But yeah, definitely put your hand up, say that you don't know. And it's all about feedback. I mean, you can always get along the way. You can always learn on the job. I think if you're not doing something right, you can simply ask someone, is this right? Is this wrong? Help me get forward. And everyone's generally willing to help you. Like, no one's going to say, no, I don't want to help you learn. Like that's not how it works. At least I haven't come across that anyway.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point, because some people who might be nervous or not feel that they have a strength in an area, and we'll use the GPS again as an example. If I go into an organisation, I haven't had experience in that yet. If I am sort of nervous and I say, "Oh, look, I'd rather not do it," it can be, I guess, misconstrued as you're being lazy and you only want to do one thing, and you don't want to try and extend yourself and do other things. So I agree with you. I think it's really important that you say, "Look, I've never done it before, but I'm really willing to learn, and I'd love to get involved." And again, you build up a whole set of new skills, and I guess that's helped you get a foot in the door with the Brumbies or different sports organisations as a sports scientist. So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, get out there. Anyone listening, improve your skills. Yeah, volunteering is the way to go, and always just ask for help. Always ask for feedback. It's a really good way to do it.
Yeah, awesome. Now, mentoring is something that we're becoming more and more prominent in sport. Do you have any mentors that have helped you along the way?
Yeah, I've had a few. I still keep in contact with some of them. My biggest mentor, going back, I mentioned his name earlier in the podcast, was John Mitchell. So at the time when I was working for Brumbies, he was our head of high performance. So he was in charge of myself as the GPS data analyst, but also in terms of the strength and conditioning coaches, which he is. He's I think he's like a level 3 master in ASCA. So he's very highly qualified in the space. He's had over 30 years of experience. He's worked for the Raiders, he's worked for the AIS and rowing, rugby union. He's actually up here now. I see him very often. He works for Queensland Rugby League. He's been my top mentor all the way through. I still keep in contact with Johnny Mitchell. Mitch is what we call him. We have sit downs once a month, try and catch up face to face about any S&C questions that I have. But we're in chats all the time over phone. But he's been a really big role model for me. He's the one that solidified my position in the Brumbies. He was the one who gave me a chance and an opportunity. So definitely very thankful and very grateful that I've met Mitch. He's been a very good mentor for me to have. And like I said, he actually works with the ASCA as well. So he informs me about any up and coming positions or things that he thinks is a good fit for me in my profile. He'll pass on the details to me, and he'll say, apply for this job, apply for that, have a look into this. He'll send me some research as well. So he's been my top mentor, I would say, in the sport and exercise field. A couple of other people going back to Brumbies as well. Ben Norcott, he's been a big mentor for me as well. So he at the time was the lead S&C for the Brumbies rugby team. He's now down in Melbourne. He works for the Royal Air Force, but same thing as Mitch. He'd help me with anything I needed. He'd always help me in the gym. He'd give me tips when I'm observing what I should be looking for. Another mentor in the Brumbies space as well was Josh Strahan. So Joshy, he was the speed and rehabilitation coach at the time. So he actually now is the head of high performance for the Raiders, but he is just an absolute bundle of knowledge, like anything from injuries to speed, velocity. And that was super, super detailed within GPS. It was all about speed, velocity, hitting accelerations and things. He was your man. He knows everything about running mechanics, acceleration, deceleration. I still send him questions every now and then about some of my athletes. How do I make this person run faster? Look at this technique. But they've been my 3 top mentors in the sport and exercise space. And then obviously on my nutrition side, I've had a few people as well.
And in terms of mentors, do you find, you talked about you meet up or you chat with them once a month or something like that. Is it always around like workspace things, or is there the opportunity to talk about, life balance or anything like that as well? Or does it just tend to be more aligned with specific work aspects?
No, yeah, definitely other things other than work. Whenever I sit down with Mitch, we never really start talking about work. It's always about, what have you been up to? Mitch has got a couple of daughters close to my age as well, so we're always talking about them. Definitely talking about what we're up to. Living the Queensland lifestyle really well. We're always talking about the beach and the nice weather. It's definitely not all about work, and I think that's something that should be really separated. I think, Mitch is a close friend. We're not just work colleagues, even though he's significantly older than me. He sees me as an equal. So, we catch up for a coffee, we talk about, life, university, what I'm up to, what he's up to, and then, work comes a bit later down the track. But I think, it's really good to have the separation, so we're not just every time I don't want him to think that I'm just using him, which is definitely not the case. I love spending time with Mitch. He's a great friend, but I think it's really important to have the separation between work and life for sure.
And how about on the nutrition side of things? Is there anyone that you can go to when you've got big nutrition questions, or, if you're looking at applying for roles in sports nutrition or something like that you can sort of bounce ideas off?
Yeah, there's been a few over the years. My very first sports dietitian going way back, her name was Sally Bowman. So Sally, she was heavily involved in rugby union. So she was the dietitian for the Reds for several years. And then she worked part-time, just on the side with some personal clients. But now Sally's actually working internationally. She works for the Winter Paralympic team for America. So she's based over there full time. But, I bounce my questions off her all the time. I'll just send her a message on Instagram or just via text and she'll get back to me straight away. But another one, Kate Pumper, she's actually been on your podcast recently. Kate was the dietitian for the Brumbies well and truly before I got there. Kate's done a lot of work in the sports nutrition field. She's been in it for over 20 years. I think she's she's done a lot of work with the Wallabies and rugby, basketball. I think, any sport, you name it, Kate's done it. She's been a really great mentor for me. She was one of my lecturers at UC as well. So any sort of university or academic question, Kate was my lady to go to. 100% bundle of knowledge. You can't go past her. She just such an amazing person, always willing to help. Super, super knowledgeable, lovely lady. And then finally moving up here, starting my master's at Bond. So I'm doing my master's in dietetics at Bond University, and the head of the program, Greg Cox, he's actually he was the sports dietitian for the London and the Rio Olympics. So Greg's just an amazing, amazing guy. He's an absolute bundle of fun. I see him daily. I always catch up with him. He's been, and I think going forward, he will be probably my biggest sports dietitian mentor. He developed the Sports Dietetics Australia program. So he's full of all the sports nutrition knowledge. But yeah, he's a really great guy. I see him every day. Same with Mitch. We don't always talk about uni or we don't talk about work. We always just talk about general life. But he's just got so much knowledge and information. He's got a lot of papers under his name, quite like Kate as well. So those are my three, three in the sport and then three in nutrition. I think it's really good that I'm lucky to have six, three on different sides. So really, really very grateful for all my experiences and where they've taken me with these people.
Yeah, awesome. No, it sounds great that you've got so many good people to bounce ideas off and help you develop your knowledge base and manage your career path. That's fantastic. Courtney, I always feel like the term sports scientist is very, very broad, as there's so many different aspects that fit under the sports scientist umbrella. What are some of the roles within sports science that you've specifically looked after or done, and maybe some other areas that you might not have done but you think are also quite important?
Yeah, sports science, I don't think anyone really knows what it encompasses. I don't even think I know every sort of space that falls under sports science. It's massive. I think obviously the big ones that I've been involved in is the ones that everybody thinks, sports science, everyone just thinks the gym. So that's obviously a really big one. So strength and conditioning. We've spoken about a little bit is the GPS, so global positioning system. So anyone listening who doesn't know what a GPS is, it's a little device that you see generally on the back of like a rugby or any team-based player. They've got like a little thing sticking out of their jersey. So that's a GPS system. So it tracks where they go, how fast they go, like accelerations, decelerations, change of direction and things like that. So they've been my, I suppose, my two biggest areas in sports science. But sports science also encompasses like biomechanics, psychology falls under as well, definitely not my forte. It also encompasses performance analysis, and this is something I kind of wish I got into, but I never really got the opportunity to. I could have done it at the Brumbies, but my workload at the time was just massive. But performance analysis are the people that run around with the cameras and the drones. That plays an absolute massive role in any sort of sport, especially a team-based sport with a ball. There's a lot of information that coaches in particular rely heavily on that data for. So things like how many tackles were there, how many drop balls were there, that's all measured purely through performance analysis. And I think if I was given an opportunity to upskill, it would definitely be in that, because it's a massive thing and a really good trade-off to have. They use a lot of different technology. They use iPads, drones, computers, iPhones, lots of different filming systems. So yeah, that's a really big one. But other than that, I've had a little bit of involvement in biomechanics. That's anyone listening, it's where they get sort of little dots and you go under a screen and you can map the pattern of movement, I suppose, on a screen, and you can predict certain equations. But yeah, that's a bit mathematical for me. I'm a bit more of a practical person. I like to see it. But yeah, they're probably the four big ones that everybody really thinks about, but performance analysis would be something I'd really like to get into.
One of the things I guess that's important is testing. Now, how often do you do testing at that elite level compared to maybe less elite levels of sport? And how much does testing, or what sort of role does testing play in selections and those sorts of things?
Oh, testing's huge, especially in a team-based sport where other people are competing for the same spot in the team in your position. I suppose at the top level, you're always really testing. Like, for example, when we're at Brumbies, everybody would have a set base of measurements that they'd have to achieve daily and on an average on a week, which I'd track and which I'd measure with Josh. So, for example, if we take max velocity, so all of our wingers and all of our backs, they had to meet a certain percent of their max velocity, or they simply wouldn't, not that they wouldn't be picked, but someone else might be favoured if they're hitting that top higher end speed targets, because at the moment the literature says if you run fast and you run fast often, it helps prevent hamstring injuries. So those people were selected heavily because they're considered, more preventable and not as less likely to be injured. But yeah, testing is a really big one, especially in the gym. You don't test that very often in the gym. That's something that you sort of do like a pre-season and then maybe in a during season and then a post-season if you're lucky. But definitely in terms of a couple of different measurements, it comes in obviously important in terms of preparing athletes and injury management and things like that. But testing at a top level, definitely all the time. I think, training itself is a test. How much energy you're putting in, how many meters are you running, that's a test itself. So yeah, definitely everyone's testing, whether if they know it or not. The coaches definitely don't. We do. We know it. We're testing athletes on a daily basis. But yeah, it plays a massive role.
So after a couple of years at the Brumbies, you moved into netball. How did this opportunity come about?
Yeah, like anything, it comes down to who you know. So I knew the head of the high performance program, working for the Queensland Firebirds at the time. So Bryn Abad, he's been all over the place. That man is just an absolute sports crazy man. He loves his sport. He's so funny. Bryn, he's worked for the Lions, the Reds. He's worked for the Queensland Firebirds several times. And at the time when I moved up here, I wasn't studying. I just graduated and I wasn't working. And I figured, in a bit of my spare time before I started my master's, I thought it'd be a good idea to go down, try and get some work. So I messaged Bryn, seeing if there was any opportunity. It most certainly wasn't a paid role. It was a volunteering position. Yet again, go back to volunteering, simply so I could go and observe, watch Bryn, see what he does on a daily basis. So I was sort of just like an assistant of head of high performance, I suppose you could say. So I was looking at what they do in the gym, what they do on the court, recovery systems. Super interesting role, that one. Very different to netball for sure. But yeah, it was just came down to who I knew. So yeah, I just contacted Bryn and that's how I got in that way.
So what are some things that you learnt that were different from what you'd previously done at the Brumbies?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Most people you'd think that, netball and rugby are completely different. The underlying principles are very similar. They do basically the exact same movements in the gym, push, pull, squat, hinge, exactly the same in rugby. Keep it simple, keep it similar, all achieving the same results. The only thing that was majorly different, which you could probably imagine, is just the team environment. So, coming from a team of boys to a team of, top performing women, very, very different in that sort of perspective. But obviously the games themselves are a little bit different as well. But yeah, overall, there wasn't a huge lot of difference other than just the team environment and how the business itself operated. Obviously, very different to how rugby union business operates. But yeah, in terms of athlete performance, very similar. Same sort of tests. In the gym, you're doing the same sort of, you're doing a squat or a deadlift or whatever, a bench press. And then out on the court, you'll be doing some sort of 1.2 or an MAS. Exact same principle in rugby union. They do exactly the same. Very, very interesting, actually, to see, but very similar.
So what does a week in high performance netball look like?
Yeah, that's it. Because I was volunteering, I didn't get a whole scope, but I obviously knew how everything went down. Being a netball women's sport, a lot of the top women that were playing, some of them have kids. Some of them have other jobs because sadly netball is just not a very top paying sport like most female sports. So all the training was very early in the morning, some midday sessions, and then late afternoon as well. So, I live on the Gold Coast, and to get to the Queensland Firebirds, they train in Brisbane. So I'd be up at like 4 a.m. in the morning. I'd travel about an hour to get to the stadium, sometimes an hour and a half, depending on traffic. So I'd be there at 5:30, do some setup preparations. Sometimes we start at 6 a.m. The girls finish at 8. They have breakfast. They go off. Some of them are still in school or uni, so they go to school, come back for like a lunchtime gym session, have lunch, go back to school, do whatever they're doing, and then come back late afternoon for a court session. So that was a double day. So that was typically a Tuesday and sometimes a Thursday. But other than that, it was individual sessions spaced out. So in the morning, this is during the season. So in the morning, for example, just be a gym session on a Monday, for example, then come back Tuesday for an afternoon court session, Wednesday morning gym, Thursday court session, Friday off, typically a game Saturday. Preseason, a little bit different. You'd have double days most days. So gym and court maybe 3 times a week, throw in a recovery session in the middle of the week, and then maybe a court and an extra cardio session at the back end of the week. Very, very different setup to Brumbies. Brumbies, we were basically, that's a full-time job for those boys. So they're paid top dollar to be there. So they're there at, like, for example, some days we'd start at 8 o'clock in the morning and we finish at 2 p.m. So they train double days most days. And then, typical day off or maybe a half day. But, very, very different sort of training environments. But, female sports, very spaced out, keeping in mind that, these women have jobs and other things going on. So, very spaced out, these sessions.
Yeah, I can imagine it'd be pretty tiring for a female athlete who is getting up at ridiculous hours of the morning, training, going off to either work or other commitments, uni commitments, like you mentioned. A lot more managing of your time and coordinating all these different things that are going on compared to those full-time professionals that we tend to see a lot more males involved in. So, you take your hat off to them because it's a big effort.
I would take my hat off to any top-level competing female. It doesn't even matter if it was netball, because I did a bit of volunteering for the women's team for the Brumbies as well. Exact same, really early mornings or really late finishes. So I really take my hat off to any sort of team sport person doing those sort of hours, because it's definitely rough. Talking about mental health, going back earlier, it's definitely tough on these women.
From your experiences working in sports science, both volunteering and working within the systems, do you think that the head coaches or the coaches that are involved with the actual players as technical coaches are open to learning from sports scientists and listening to or valuing the feedback from sports scientists around recovery and all the different principles that sports scientists have good knowledge on?
Yeah, this is I suppose a highly individual question. I think I've worked with a mix of people who I would definitely say no, they're not open to learning anything. They're very set in their ways, very traditional. I suppose it could also depend on the sport. I know not Brumbies, they were very open to learning, but I have seen in the past a couple of teams where their head coach is they're very focused on purely just how many meters they're running and how fast they're going, which we know can be, if their athletes are working a lot and if they're working at a significant higher rate, we don't want them running too many meters, but they're not open to understanding that sort of principle. They're only willing that, they should be running this many meters because back in the day, that's how many meters we ran. But I think, very individual on the coach. But I think most coaches are definitely open to learning. I think especially sort of coming, not maybe so much from the sports scientist myself, but being a sports scientist, we generally feedback our information to the head of performance, and it definitely looks better coming from them rather than someone lower down the food chain like myself. So I suppose it comes back down to someone like me or a sports scientist and our ability to communicate the most important messages and prioritization, I suppose, to get that message across to the head of performance to hopefully then influence the coach and make them learn. But I think most people are open to feedback and they're definitely open to learning. But I would say, it just depends on the sport, but very individual as well, I suppose.
All right, great. Now that answer sort of leads me on to my next question. As a sports scientist, if there was 3 critical areas that you were to identify and try and educate your head coach on, because they make the biggest impact on performance, what do you think those 3 things would be and why?
Oh, that's a really big one.
I'm throwing you under the bus there a bit. So
I better not get this wrong. No, this is very individual, but I think we spoke about it before. I think having a very good athlete monitoring system, that is the base of any top performing sport, whether that be a team sport or an individual sport. It doesn't even have to be using a system, to be honest. I've worked in sports where we don't have any money at all. We're just using an Excel spreadsheet and Google Docs or whatever. Or you can go really top tier, like at Brumbies, we use Smarterbase. So they're just it's just like an athlete monitoring system, like an app on your phone, and you rate, how sore you are and like you've done on a daily basis or whatever. That can give you a lot of information about your athletes. And I think that's kind of underlooked. Like some people just skim over that. But I think in particular for female athletes, because, we've got sort of our menstrual cycle and we operate very functionally different to males, it's something that should be largely considered, but also for males as well. Like we need to know how they're feeling and what's going on internally, because I find, and being an athlete myself, we don't like sharing how we feel because we feel like we're going to get penalized or we're going to miss out on opportunities for it, where in fact it has the opposite effect. We want to know how you're feeling because it's a representation of our program. Like, for example, if I've given you an exercise to do, like a deadlift or something, and you've pulled up with an 8 out of 10 hamstring soreness, and then you say there's nothing wrong with you and you go out on the field, that can be super detrimental to your health. Like you could snap a hamstring so easily. And I think no one really looks into this sort of data in particular, the areas I've been in. I shouldn't throw everybody under the bus like that. In the areas that I've been in, people underlook it, and it's not something that's really taken into consideration. And I think we need to know how they're feeling. What's going on in their lives is important. Like we don't need to know every single little detail, but if they're struggling financially or if they're struggling to get enough sleep, like these are the things we need to know about so we can connect them with the right people. So I think, athlete monitoring system, that would be my number one for sure. I think second most important thing, obviously gym. I mean, you can't be an athlete without being, strong. That kind of underlies every sort of performance movement. You need to have, a really solid frame, depending on what sport you're doing, obviously, but gym is the underlying basis of all sort of athletic performance. You need to be strong, flexible, whatever. And I think that comes down, great coaching is always good. That always helps, I suppose, having a really good knowledge and understanding. But the coach, I think, being open, if you're going to be a coach, you shouldn't just specify on one sport. You need to have a really quite broad understanding of all different things. So what we're doing in the gym basically is going to replicate what you're going to be doing in performance. And I think there's a lot of different ways that you can get that, that same movement to replicate that certain pattern. And I think, understanding your athlete, for example, this is where that athlete management and monitoring system comes back into play. If you know that your athlete's got hip pain or if they can't squat properly, you need to find some sort of alternate pathway, because ultimately that exercise could be detrimental to their health and their performance or their strength or whatever you're trying to achieve. So I think, AMS and gym.
When you talk about the AMS and you talk about the issues in terms of athletes not wanting to be honest because they're worried that they might not get selected if they're feeling fatigued, or they're worried they might be dropped if they're tired and they can't train as hard as some of the other players in the team. How can we develop that so that athletes aren't going to be punished if they are honest and they speak the truth and they talk about their how they're feeling, both mentally and physically?
I think being able to communicate that as an athlete, it shows a lot of maturity. I think it really identifies the young players to the ones with more experience. I think if we're using rugby union as an example, a really classic one which we see underreporting by athletes is concussion. If you get a head knock on the field, everybody knows that you have to come off for a HIA. That's just how it is, and that's set by Rugby Australia for everybody's, mental health and, brain injuries and things like that. And a lot of people are really hesitant to come off the field because they know it's going to be time off. It's, it means someone else might look better in their position, or it could be, it might just be that player might be better than the person that's sitting on the bench and they don't want to let the team down. And I think being able to recognize that that's a huge problem, not only for your own health and safety, but it could be detrimental to your team. If you have a concussion and you're walking around on the field, you might be missing opportunities like, your brain's not operating at 100% capacity. Someone might sidestep you or go around you or whatever it might be. And I think, you're letting your team down in that perspective as well. So being able to put your hand up and recognize what you're doing, it's going to impact you. It's going to have some sort of impact on the team. That is going to show maturity to the coaching staff. I know certainly for me, it shows maturity, and I would go, yeah, this person's owning they're not well. What can we do to get them better? And it's not an opportunity for them to miss out. It's an opportunity for them to get back to good health. Because at the end of the day, like, health is 100% the focus. Yes, we want to be performing at 100% capacity, and yes, we want to be winning. But if our athletes if they're not healthy and they're not well, then that's a really big, and that's a serious issue. Like, we need to be making sure these people are okay, and putting a hand up to say that you're not okay, that's definitely the first step. The third point about being, really, really important for performance and have a big impact, I think, is recovery. I think we all know there's different types of recovery out there, like nutritionally, there's recovery, physically, there's recovery, mentally, there's recovery. I think talking about the physical side of recovery, though, everyone thinks about, ice bath, you got stretching, foam rolling, and a couple of other different, thousands of different areas. And literature kind of tells us there's not a whole lot of evidence to say that one method really works well. It's really about a placebo effect, which is where, if the athlete just thinks they're feeling better, whether or not they actually are or not, but that has an impact on their performance. But, if you're feeling good and, you're feeling okay, we'll take that any day of the week rather than feeling terrible. But I think, recovering is super, super important. Obviously, nutritionally, that's something that I'm still currently, but physically, you're having a big game or you've done something really strenuous, you need to be recovering well, whether that's eating right. Everyone's got their own individual recovery system. And I think that's really, really important to understand, that it's like anything really, not one thing's going to work for everybody. And you need to be understanding of what works for you. And I suppose you can even tie that back into your athlete monitoring system, being able to identify, what works best for different athletes. So you can have different programs going at the same time. So for example, when we worked at Brumbies, in the bottom underneath the facility, we have an ice bath, a heat, like a sauna or a heat area, and then just a general pool. So these were some of our different recovery modes that we would use for the athletes that like to submerge themselves in an ice bath, for example, or go into a sauna. We'd also have just what we call like foot baths. So, we'd put like some aloe vera gel in them, bit of eucalyptus, and we'd fill that with ice for some people, or it'd be hot water. So like just like a foot soak. It's really individual, it's really kind of B grade evidence to say that it really does anything. But like I said, if it makes our athletes feel better, going back to health and well-being, that's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve 100% performance and 100% health. So recovery, super, super important there.
Okay, before we finish, Courtney, can you tell me, first of all, what your Instagram handle is, in case someone might be wanting to get in touch, and also give me a bit more information around your business and what you might be doing in that?
Yeah, sure. So my Instagram handle is just my name. So it's Courtney_Brackenrig. So just have a look in the podcast for how to spell that, because it's a bit of a mouthful that last name. But in terms of my business, so it's something that I'm getting up and running at the moment. So the Instagram tag for that, it's biofueled_. So BIOFUELED_. So have a look at that. It comes under as an alternate and holistic health service, because that's what we are. We're not sort of a westernized sort of business. We're not trying to do anything really fancy out there. It's just all natural. Basically what we do, what I offer, you can book in for a 15-minute free consultation where we can talk about anything regarding sort of like your nutrition or your sport performance or any goals that you're trying to achieve. That 15-minute session is free, no charge, no guarantees or anything like that. We just have a little discussion about, what you're trying to achieve and things like that. And if you think that what I can offer you sounds, ideal, or think I can help you, then we can book in either something like a 30-minute, a 45-minute, or 60-minute, or an extended consultation. I don't have a website for that up and running at the moment, so feel free to just flick me a message on Instagram and we can chat all things. But basically what we offer, like I mentioned, nutrition consultation, so I can have a look, because I'm not an accredited practicing dietitian as of yet, I can't prescribe and sit down and say, you need to eat this with this supplement and things like that. But I can give good specific advice surrounding nutrition. I can give a macronutrient distribution as well. In terms of our strength and conditioning, so I do offer personal training, either one-on-one if you're up here based on the Gold Coast, for example, small group sessions, teams as well. We use an app called Team Builder, so we're actually all online as well. So if anyone's listening and you think you might need some sort of strength and conditioning guidance, or you're looking to drop a few kilos or whatever, definitely flick us a message. We can help you with that. All of our programs are based online. You have 24/7 contact with me, either via email on the app, or you can send me a message via the Instagram page. But yeah, I myself, my business, all I want to do is just help people. Like I said, the first 15 minutes is free. I'd really encourage anybody just to reach out. I'd love to be in contact with you. Even if it's just to say hello, you get to meet new people and see faces. I think that's a really great way to connect, and you never know where those connections are going to take you. But yeah, if that sounds like something you're interested in, all natural, really interested in helping you and achieve your goals, definitely, flick me a message. I'd be super keen to jump on and meet up with you. But yeah, if not, I do have an email for Biofueled as well. which is on the Instagram. But if anyone doesn't have Instagram, feel free to flick me an email. It's info.biofield@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, Courtney, thanks so much for giving up your time this afternoon. It's been really interesting talking to someone, of your experience, that you're a younger sports scientist coming through the ranks. You've done a heap of volunteering along the way. You've done you've got a heap of experience in different aspects of sports science from different roles you've held within different organisations. So there's some really good advice there for other sports scientists that are looking to develop themselves as well. And also, I guess, from an athlete perspective, some of your experiences and some of your stories on your pathway as an athlete into where you are now as well was really, really enjoyable. So thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I hope everyone can take a piece of information away and learn something. Like I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. But yeah, thanks for having me, James. It's been an absolute blast.
Awesome. No worries at all. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Courtney. Some of the key takeaways for me was the importance of volunteering. This can be done while you're still studying or as a recent graduate. As Courtney identified, all of her paid roles came off the back of volunteering first. It also creates a great network within the industry, which at times can be very much who you know, not what you know. Secondly, Courtney had a great attitude towards mentors. Despite completing a degree, having experience as an elite athlete, and having some industry experience as a sports scientist, she wants to continue to learn of some people who have played a role in her development. This is a really good lesson, as we're never too experienced to stop learning. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. Please pass it on to friends and colleagues within the sports industry, and until next time, keep learning.